Welcome to the Pollock Theatre. We just finished watching a screening of Sarah Friedland's debut feature film, Familiar Touch, which already won a couple of awards at the Venice Film Festival last year. The Orizzonti, what is it about?
The Orizzonti Award for Best Director and Luigi De Laurentiis for Best Debut Film.
And Kathleen Chalfant got the Best Actress Award also. So, welcome to the Pollock Theatre, I have to say to you also. Is this your first time?
It's my first time in the Pollock because I moved out of Santa Barbara in 2010 when it was built. But I should say I'm a UCSB brat. My dad is a retired UCSB professor, and so I grew up on campus. I mean, not literally on campus, but I spent so much of my childhood here and would go see films at Campbell Hall.
Yeah.
So I saw films, I grew up seeing films here, but not here.
And so it's kind of homecoming.
It's definitely a homecoming.
Where did you go to school here?
I went to Dos Pueblos.
Oh, done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
It's funny, like we recently had Greg Araki, he's also from Goleta.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's where he grew up and went to school here. So why did you leave Santa Barbara? What for?
I went to college and,
Where?
I went to Brown University. And I feel like the nature of being a professor's kid is you try to go as far away from where your parents teach. So I went to the East Coast.
So diagonally across,
Exactly.
not even straight.
Exactly, yeah. So I went to Brown University. I studied in the Department of Modern Culture and Media, which is their sort of semiotics plus department, if you will. So I had a kind of wonderful theoretical education there.
So for our students, that's the 192 series. I have to plug that, yeah. So, I mean, that's useful, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I went in wanting to study film theory and choreography, and I started making experimental dance films as a student, but, I think I left Santa Barbara as a professor's kid thinking theory is not for me, I need to stay far away from it. I've seen what it's done to my father. And then I got to Brown and fell in love with critical theory and the apple, the tree, that whole thing. But for me it was wonderfully useful for making films to not have a sort of film school education, but instead to have a very kind of a critical education. It taught me how to think and deconstruct, and that ended up being what I needed out of a university education. And then I got my kind of film school education on sets. After graduation, I worked and did every entry-level job you can on a film set for about 4 years. So it was the combination of semiotics and then entry-level film work that was my...
So where were these entry-level jobs?
New York City.
New York City. So that put you in a more experimental indie scene?
No, because at the time there were these tax incentives that were bringing productions to New York. So I was working for major television shows. Like I worked on HBO's Girls for a while. So I was, working on very, very big budget productions as an assistant. But it gave me the sort of skill set of understanding who does what on a crew, and the kind of, it's so much of directing, I think, is about making sure the right person gets the right piece of information at the right time. And on that scale of a production, you see the kind of procedure of it all at an immense scale. And so it was a great education for me in that way, even though it wasn't aesthetically kind of the work I wanted to make.
So chefs often talk about mise en place. Do you know this? Like how you can do parts of the thing and then put it together then. So would you say that's useful for filmmaking also?
Absolutely, because I think when you're at the bottom of the pecking order on a crew that large, you have to understand exactly what every person does. Because for example, the job I had on Girls was the script coordinator. So I was responsible for knowing who got which revised pages when. And there's a complicated hierarchy of who gets what when. And therefore, you need to know who needs what information when, and therefore, what is every person's specific role. And I think that understanding of the kind of craft of each crew member helped me become a director, because by the time I stepped onto my own set, I knew in detail what everyone's function was, and then you can collaborate if you understand what people do and what information they need to do their work well.
Can you give us an example from this film set?
Sure. Okay, so for example, the exam room scenes. It was important to me that Ruth be sitting on wax paper, because to me the wax paper of an exam room is part of what gives it this kind of uncanny clinical feeling. And so I had a long conversation before filming that scene with our on-set sound recordist and our script supervisor, who's in charge of continuity, to figure out if we filmed it with real, and with our production designer, if we filmed it with real wax paper, would the sound of her actually crinkling on the chair ruin the recording of the dialogue? But if we used another type of paper, would it be clear that it was a simulation of wax paper? And would then adding the sound of the wax paper as Foley in post feel weird? And we ultimately decided on a gentle form of wax paper that, but that's, I mean, it's a very, that's an example.
What is a gentle form of wax paper?
It was, it comes in different thickness,
Okay.
you could.
Parchment paper?
We found one that was sonic, but not too voluminous.
Wow.
So that's, knowing that we needed to have that conversation before filming. It's minutiae, but
the kitchen stuff really got into the filmmaking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it starts with the kitchen. Incredible scene, and we were so aware of the lighting there, and we'll talk about that more hopefully, but the sound also. But I'm just fascinated by the wax paper business, because it has both the sound that you have to be worrying about, but also the tactility, that kind of feel of it. It could stick to you, or all kinds of things can happen, right? And you have to be wary of that. Do you think this sort of detailed selections shape the performance?
Absolutely.
In the way you want them to be, or?
Absolutely, because for me, one of the earliest choices in writing Familiar Touch was that it would not only be from Ruth's perspective, but it would be from her embodied perspective, not her cognitive perspective. Because I think so often our cinema around aging, or I should say American cinema on aging, tends to get into a narrative of decline, that the whole drama of the film is about a person losing themselves. And I think we get that in part from seeing people as just their cognition, rather than all of their senses. And so I felt that if we could root the film in her sense-making of herself and of the world around her, then the central drama wouldn't be of this loss, but rather of almost a heightening of these other senses, because I think it's something people don't know about dementia and memory loss, that a lot of folks who go through it have a kind of amplification of their kind of sensory sensitivity. And so I wanted the language of the film to reflect that. And Kathleen is an extraordinary performer, and that she, not only in her work with other actors, but she understands, she walks onto a set and she understands what all of the craftspeople have created that she's stepping into, and performs with it. So she knew in a very attuned way what we were trying to do with the kind of language of the film, and was constantly playing with it with us.
How did you come to choose her? How did you come to her? Because it'll be a different film without her.
Oh, it had to be her.
Yeah.
I'd been a fan of hers for a long time, particularly I knew her collaborations with Yvonne Rainer. I'm coming from a background making dance films, and so I was a fan of, definitely a fan of Yvonne's, and then knew Kathy's work through.
Tell them a bit about Yvonne, some people may not know.
Yes, for those who don't know, Yvonne Rainer is an amazing choreographer and filmmaker, and works between live dance performance and sort of experimental and narrative cinema. And Kathleen has worked with her on a number of projects, but I think perhaps the one that I love most is a film called Murder and Murder, where Kathleen plays a sort of fictionalized version of Yvonne's partner. But I mean, Yvonne's work is very much attuned to kind of the everyday patterns of bodies, and that's obviously
I'm remembering Privileges, I think.
Yeah.
So her neck. I mean, there's a way that she uses parts of her body in such specific way that it becomes so heightened, right?
Yeah.
That our sense of what she's doing. Tell us a bit more, and particularly like what kind of preparation did you do with her?
We had no time for preparation, largely because of budget and schedule. She took a red eye from New York to Los Angeles, and we met on the first day
of shooting,
and we shot. She landed at LAX at 10 a.m. and our first shot was at noon.
Oh, that's brutal.
So yes, we shot for 18 and a half days. It was a very fast shoot, and we could shoot no longer than 8 hours a day because we were working in a real care facility, and so that was our agreement with them, that we wouldn't shoot longer than 8 days, 8 hours a day. In terms of preparation, it just wasn't possible, and so we agreed on certain principles the day before, and we found that we sort of trusted each other immediately, and that our ideas for Ruth were very, very much, they just worked together. So I think one of the main things we agreed on together that was baked into the script, but I needed her commitment to it for it to work, was that Ruth would not be fixed as an old woman. That Ruth was going to, that she would access all of the Ruths that Ruth had been, child Ruth, teenage Ruth, 20-something Ruth, and that our work together would be finding the sort of different versions and different age identities of herself that will appear and emerge in different scenes. And so that was one of the main things we kind of agreed upon together going in. And then 2 days into filming, I think we made the most important choice for our collaboration, which was that we decided we would stop rooting ourselves in the kind of linear time of the script. Because the script was, written with these sort of scenes and fragments. It was never, there's linear time, but it was meant to be not quite so progressive in the way that a lot of narrative films are, that we would be in Ruth's time. That said, the first 2 days, we did what is typical of a director and an actor on a set, where you film out of sequence, out of script order, which is that you say, okay, this is scene 26, this comes before this other thing that we've already shot, and just reminding ourselves that this just happened. And we decided that that was actually counterproductive to the type of time we were trying to create and the character. That we decided we needed to treat every scene like its own temporal universe that Ruth was present in. And so we stopped orienting ourselves in the script, and it liberated us to just allow the Ruth that was in each scene to emerge. And there's a scholar named Lynn Siegel, whose work was really important to us. She writes about this idea of temporal vertigo, particularly for older adults. She says that in being able to sort of access all of the selves we've been, it renders us all ages and no age. And that idea of temporal vertigo was something we kept coming back to on set. So that's all to say we did not prepare. I mean, obviously there was great preparation going into filming, but as a director-actor partnership, we did not prepare in a lengthy way.
That's such a gorgeous way of thinking about it, that different versions of Ruth at different ages existing together in somehow, like it may be one pops up any given day, right? And so because we have this thing of Bloch's famous line, synchronicity of the non-synchronous, but I've never thought of it in terms of an individual person's lifespan. And it works beautifully as an example, I think.
Absolutely.
This is not the usual, how to put it, it's an unusual subject for a first feature debut, even for an indie film, let's say. How did you get to it?
You put that in such a polite way, because so many people have asked me, my friends, how is it that as a young woman, why have you spent all of your 20s and now a good chunk of your 30s with old people? Is the rude way I've been asked. I mean, the origin of it comes from an experience with my grandmother. She was a poetry editor and an intellectual, and someone whose sense of self was deeply rooted in her linguistic expression. And a few years into her experience of dementia, she became nonverbal. And my family, having sort of been raised in the culture that she set, coming from a family of academics, we started speaking about her in the past tense as if she were no longer there. And at the time I was starting to study dance and becoming really interested in embodied expression. And I would visit her at the assisted living facility where she spent the last few years of her life. And she was so physically present. She would rock, she would tap rhythm, she would reach out to touch you. And that space between the person we spoke about in absentia and the person who was very much present and herself, just in another form that was in front of me, that gap haunted me for many years after she died. And then cut to about a decade later, I'd been working all of these jobs in film and felt like if I want to make humanist dramas about people other than filmmakers, I need to meet them. And so I quit my filmmaking, my jobs working for other filmmakers, and I needed a day job. And I answered an ad for a caregiving agency that had a lot of creative and artistic clients. And I trained to become a memory caregiver and did home care work for about 3.5 years.
And most of these were artists? And
many were artists or sort of creatives of different kinds.
Dancers?
No dancers, but I worked for a performance artist for a long time, some interior designers, a theater producer. And that job changed everything I thought I knew about aging and the intimacy of care work and also about age identity. One of the most interesting things about that job to me was that my clients who were in their 80s and 90s, I was in my early 20s at the time, I would see them identifying with me. That it wasn't they were the older and I was the younger, but we were peers or comrades or in cahoots in some way, and that I started identifying with them. And it made me realize my own ageism, that I went into the job seeing older adults as other than me, and I left seeing them as people, in a few years, just in a few years' time. And it helped me realize how deeply embedded our ageism is. And that fluid age identity, that temporal vertigo that Lynn Siegel writes about, is not just something older adults experience. We all can access all of the selves we've been. And it made me sort of curious about age as a component of our identity, and that it was something I could play with. In writing the script, I think a big turning point for me was kind of claiming the coming of age genre as a sort of loose architecture for the script, that I could use that genre for a character study of an older woman, because I think what's interesting about the coming of age genre is that for younger characters,
coming of age genre,
they go through loss, they lose their innocence, they lose home, they lose all of these things, and we don't say they've lost themselves. We say they've come of age. But for older characters, they go through loss, and we say they've lost themselves. And so I felt like as a younger filmmaker, I could kind of co-opt the genre for an older character. And in terms of your question of this being an unconventional first feature, I think I felt a little bit cheeky, because it's sort of a cliche that first-time feature filmmakers make arty coming-of-age films that play the festival circuit. And I felt that I could just do my version of it.
Awesome. At one point when I was in grad school, one of my professors who loved going to live venues to watch bands and stuff, he said, I don't do that much anymore. I said, why? He said, because when I go in, I see these people look at me like, who's this old creep? like it's on their face. And I
Yeah.
thought he was being too sensitive. Now that I'm older and I'm feeling that, it's different.
Yeah.
So exactly, like that could be like a foundational thing for our interaction with various ages, right? Like to think about what we share. Maybe it was in the past for me, but it's still there. I mean, I don't necessarily think I'm like this age when I walk into some space,
Yeah.
Different spaces, maybe I'll be 34, maybe I'll be 19.
Absolutely.
Okay, the dance thing. I really want to talk about that because aging has to do with, one of the things that no one can avoid is the bodily decrepitude, like slowly, that part. And dancing is very much about the body. And I was remembering Merce Cunningham at the end of his, whole career. And I saw him at UCLA, I think, and it was very touching how he moved, and he could barely move, and yet he was dancing still with his troupe on stage. It's so much about the body. And I feel like for me, the two things that become very important when thinking about dance and the body and embodiment is the relationship that the body has to the surroundings or its milieu that sustains it, that it acts upon and interacts with in all kinds of ways. And that milieu, what is the body's orientation to it, right? How is the sort of co-happening? And the other one is the gestural capacities of the body, which one could say sculpting in time or space, or, like gestures are forms of communication. So if you can talk a little bit about these two aspects of the dance and the film.
Yeah, I think I was coming into writing Familiar Touch, having made a series of experimental dance films and video installations that all looked at sort of different forms of social choreography. And through the process of making those films, started kind of writing this script in particular with gesture as the starting point. So the very first draft of this script was just imagining Ruth's movements through her home of many decades for the last time, and then her movements for her home of we don't know how long for the first time. And that was the very first draft. It almost read like a movement score. And that's how I approach screenwriting. I start with these patterns of locomotion and then gestural exchange. And I think, I was working as a caregiver had a huge impact on this, in part because I just felt in that job hyper aware of these moments of gestural exchange, that there's so much there's so much touch and physical intimacy in the job, and then also noticed the kind of creativity of my clients in their choreographic patterns. So to give one example, there was a woman that I cared for who used a walker to get around, but she didn't want to use her walker in her home. So she knew exactly how far her body had to be from every wall, couch, surface in her home at any point to have something to hold on to. And so she had these very elaborate patterns of how to move through her home so that she had something to hold on to without her walker. And the creativity of that to me was so beautiful. And the aesthetics of it were too, because she had these sort of loop-de-loops through her home. So I started thinking a lot about the kind of choreography of aging, and the beauty of it, because not to say there isn't suffering and pain, of course there is, but sometimes I think our depictions of that eclipse the person who continues. There was never, coming from the work that I've been making, there was no way in which this wasn't going to be a dance film in a way, but I think my work as a caregiver kind of made clear what that gestural choreography would be. Yeah.
And you've made shorter films about dance, right?
None of them about sort of stylized dance, all about kind of choreographies of everyday life. So, for example, one was about older adults moving in their homes. Another was about the choreography of preparation and drills. Another was about the choreography of corporate team building retreats. I'm really interested in kind of these non-dancerly choreographies.
the scene where all this comes together is in the pool. It just explodes on us in the kind of surprisingly. And I had this very confusing, reaction the first time I saw it. Like, I thought, oh, this is going to be corny. And it isn't. In fact, I would say that's the most experimental part of the entire film for me. It stands out. How did you come to think about, was it because there was a pool that you decided? Or?
No, I had 2 orthopedic surgeries that required me to have extensive physical therapy, and one day I had aquatherapy, and it was the most pronounced experience of kind of timelessness that I'd had. And so that was the starting point for the scene of thinking, okay, if we're trying to get to this Ruth that is all ages and no age, to let her have this moment of kind of floating transcendence. And then I started thinking about the backstory I was imagining for her, and thinking that she probably went to Coney Island in her childhood, and then kind of wrote on the page the soundscape that returns to her. But it came from a kind of sensory experience that I had in physical therapy.
So you came up with the synchronicity business because you got old at an early age for briefly.
Sure, yeah. Let's say
receiving
that.
End.
Let's say that.
I don't know why. I just assumed it was a documentary before watching it, when you were getting the stuff at Venice and all that. And we were in touch with your father, who was very proud. And so we were really excited to have you here eventually.
Shout out to Daddy / Professor Roger Friedland.
Yeah. He was one of my early mentors on this campus.
Wonderful.
So, not quite a documentary. It seems like you're very influenced by documentary, though, right? Like the kind of detail of...
It's funny because my work before this has circulated within documentary film festivals, but all of my references are from dance and experimental and narrative cinema.
Yeah.
So I look at, it. Obviously, there are these echoes, but it doesn't come from me being steeped in documentary cinema. But it is there, certainly.
When they're playing, what is it, bingo or whatever, those scenes also, it's unusual. Anyway, what is documentary at this point? Like we're talking about...
I'm not going to touch that question.
Yeah. We'll leave it to some people who know better.
I'll leave that for the film scholars.
Yeah. The other scene that's really stayed with, there are many. I can think of when she runs away and enters that space of that very neon lit, it's so surreal in LA, right? That was great for me, that stayed with me. And the other one, you helped me make sense of that. At night, the woman with the walker, and then she does strange movements next to her, and what was she doing? It was very effective, but I don't know what effect it had on me.
Yeah, I was thinking... in some ways this addresses your documentary question. I was thinking about how I would balance sort of realism and surrealism in the film, and I felt that the kind of intensification of Ruth's senses created an opportunity for surrealism, that came out of this kind of heightened sensory experience. And so one of the things that's a common fixture of care facilities is that they have motion sensor lights within corridors and public spaces. And it seemed to me that somebody who is going through memory loss, that there would be, who's sort of attuned to this new environment, also because it's new to them, that kind of on and off of the lights would be very uncanny. And the woman who passes her is doing vestibular therapy, which is for restoring balance. And she's doing exercises that I actually had to do with a client of mine. But that scene and the pool and several other moments in the film came from my desire to try to kind of create a sense of surrealism from that heightened sensation that Ruth is experiencing.
Sound.
Yes.
Insane sound, and you guys don't know this. She insisted on staying for the first couple of minutes just to make sure that the hangers were making the right amount of sound. Then she would know that the whole film will be okay in terms of the sound volume.
It's my ritual.
Tell me a bit more. Like, it's just so magnificent. Like,
Oh, thank you. I worked with an amazing sound designer named Eli Cohn. And
sorry, maybe you should also fold that in with the, the texture, the tactility of various clothing. I mean, all of this work together wonderfully.
Yeah. So, okay, we'll do both threads. So in terms of the sound, one of the earliest choices I made in the script was that there could not be a score or a soundtrack, that we needed to hear this transition of home that Ruth goes through the ambient sound. And so Eli and I focused on a few different threads in that. One was just in how the film was mixed. We wanted it to, in some ways, replicate the experience that older adults have with sound, which is that for many people, sort of sonic space collapses, and that more distant sounds can feel quite close, and that differentiation is a little bit less pronounced. So normally, in narrative sound mixers, traditionally what they do is they take all of the ambient sounds of a space and they kind of push it to the edge of the sonic frame. And we did the opposite. We recorded additional ambient sound and then brought it very close so that someone talking over there can feel like here. Because I wanted people to kind of experience in their bodies what Ruth is experiencing. The other thing was we wanted the loss of Ruth's home to be manifest in the sound. So that meant creating a very, very clear soundscape for her home that then, goes away, and all of a sudden we're in institutional space. And to create the soundscape of Bella Vista, I surveyed the residents of the care facility we collaborated with to ask them, what were the sounds that signified to you this transition? And it was really interesting. There are all of these patterns in their responses. Most of them, the main patterns were, one, the sounds of institutional space. So for them, that was the HVAC, the sort of pitch of lights. The sounds of labor, so walkie-talkies, shift changes, hearing a leaf blower at the same time every Wednesday afternoon, these sort of patterns. And then the most moving to me was a lot of them remarked on the sound of ambulances and the fear of that sound, that could signify that your friend was not okay, or heaven forbid it was coming for you. So we created the soundscape largely in response to their feedback. And then I'll just say another component that I think I find interesting is one of the ways ageism shows up in the film industry is that when you go to look for walla, which is when you film crowd scenes, typically you have all the background actors, they'll open their mouths, but they won't make sound, and then you add that sound after, and it's usually something kind of pre-recorded that a sound mixer will then bring in. And all of those pre-recordings are of younger voices. We could not find crowd walla for older voices.
But why is that?
Because of ageism, Bhaskar. And so we recorded our own. So I went to several different groups of older adults and asked them if they would gossip for me for 2 hours.
Right.
And it was so much fun. So we had to create our own walla.
Yeah.
But then then the tactility of it all. This goes back to this idea of the perspective being Ruth's sensory perspective and wanting to feel this sort of haptic, tactile quality, both because of her heightened sensation, but also to kind of bring out her desire. It was really important for me that Ruth's sexuality is not the butt of a joke, but that in addition to her sexuality, there's a sense of kind of material desire for the world, for food, for touch, for aesthetics, and so that tactility was a way for us to bring that out. And of course, it's a combination of the production design, the cinematography, and having sound design that was very attuned to every moment that she touches or brushes anything. We really kind of cranked it up a little bit.
The lighting too. I mean, you said the cinematography, but particularly the temperatures of different lights, the quality of it, and when she leaves her home, the way she looks back and the light at a slant. That's incredible. The kitchen, the way it looks.
Yeah.
There are many other scenes like that that are extraordinary in terms of the lighting.
Yeah, I wanted. We talked a lot about the sensation of sunlight on skin and wanting the kind of light and temperature of Ruth's home to kind of have that feeling and for it to echo later on. That
the guy who's on that balcony at the
exactly, yeah.
Again and again. You see.
I think that and that guy is a sociology professor named Bernard Beck. And he reminded me a lot of my dad, and I think he's like my dad in 10 years. Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, location shooting in this facility. Tell us a bit, like you already said that 8 hours, no more, because there were constraints.
Yeah.
And how was working with the actual residents of the space?
Yeah, I mean, it was another sort of early choice in terms of process. I felt that if we were going to make this sort of anti-ageist character study, that the methods of production should match the ethos of the film. Okay. And that meant that older adults would be our crew and our partners in making it. So it was clear to me that we needed to film, not only film in a real care facility, but have the residents and the staff a part of our process. So it took a long time to find the right place. I was looking for a place that had the resources to support their residents and staff while going through this, because we wouldn't as a micro-budget feature. So just from an ethics standpoint, they needed to have those resources in place. And then this community, Villa Gardens, has a fascinating history as a retirement community for educators. It was founded by Ethel Percy Andrus, who founded the AARP, and it started as a care collective of women teachers this was before Social Security. All of them were single women who didn't have a safety net, and they pooled their money to buy a house and age together. And almost 100 years later, it's still very much a home for retired educators. So there's this sort of culture of lifelong learning there. So they were interested in the idea of a feature film being a sort of intergenerational artist residency and this kind of experiment. So myself and my department heads, so my production designer, cinematographer, costume designer, Carolyn Michelle, who plays Vanessa, and a few of our other crew members facilitated a 5-week-long filmmaking workshop for the residents. Okay. And they learned filmmaking soup to nuts. And each
that must
week,
have excited them.
Oh, it was phenomenal and excited us. We met twice a week, and this is all during pre-production. And the first session of each week was a hands-on practicum on whatever crew members' craft. So our DP taught cinematography, Carolyn taught acting, and then the second session of each week, they would make a short film of their own design, and everyone would rotate crew roles each week. So if you were acting one week, you were directing the next. So at the end of those 5 weeks, everyone not only knew the kind of mechanisms of production, but they figured out where they were talented and where they were interested, and then signed up for whatever department they wanted to be in.
So they were crew.
Oh, absolutely. More were crew than, well, no, it's kind of pretty even between cast and crew. And then those 5 weeks enabled us to get to know every department of the care facility, because it's much like a film set, and there's all of these different departments. So housekeeping, maintenance, food services, nursing, etc. And that enabled us to not only get to know the care workers there, but understand the sort of details of their labor, for two reasons. One, to try to portray it authentically, but two, to then craft a schedule around the rhythms of life and work there. So, typically you create a film schedule around actor availability and light. Ours was kind of all built around the rhythms there. And then a lot of their staff ended up sort of consulting on the film in terms of the details of care work, of how do you prepare someone to be bathed? How do you administer medication, et cetera? How do you dress someone? And then we discovered that there were many cinephiles among us, so then we cast the care workers there in a number of different roles. So if you stepped onto our set, it seemed more like this intergenerational experiment than it did a traditional film set.
And it feels more like a collaboration.
Very much so. I mean, it was heavily scripted, but the way we went about it was highly collaborative.
Yeah. There's some other interesting collaborations on that are happening for this film. The chef, I forget her name.
Molly Katzen.
Yeah, her book.
Yeah.
And how far was her contribution?
Very far. It was so Molly. For those who don't know, Molly Katzen wrote. I think it's the first vegetarian cookbook in America, if not the most influential. And I had interviewed her as a part of the research for this film.
Is it the Moosehead book?
The Moosewood.
Oh,
yeah.
Moosewood.
I had interviewed her because I wanted to create this past for Ruth, but not a past that came through in flashbacks, one that would kind of slowly reveal itself to us through material details and actions that Ruth takes. And I was imagining her as being this left-wing Jewish feminist cook who came of age in this particular moment of counterculture, and Molly is exactly of that moment, and she was incredibly generous in kind of talking me through different questions I had, and helping me craft Ruth's history. And then we hit it off so much that I asked her, do you want to design the meals that Ruth makes? And then she lent us her real archive. And then she gifted us her borscht recipe. So Ruth's borscht recipe is Molly's borscht recipe. And then she flew to LA to train Kathy in knife skills.
Right.
And then came to set and just started working with our crew and created all the meals. So Molly became a huge part of our crew. And I think the texture of Ruth's past in terms of cooking and Jewishness is very much something that Molly helped us bring to life. And her imprint is just beautifully in the film.
Also, remember the kitchen at the beginning, like where she's cooking. It's very specific. Like, did she have any input in that?
Oh yeah. So Molly worked with our production designer Stephanie Olsen-Cohen, and together they picked every pot, cookbook, dish rag. Like they were so. That kitchen did not look like that. I mean, they were so detailed. I mean, Stephanie is an extraordinary production designer. She. If there are lemons on a counter, she wants it to be two, not three. She's just like very, very, very detail oriented, and she and Molly were this incredible collaboration. That Molly brought the history, and Stephanie brought the
Stephanie last name is
Olsen-Cohen.
Okay.
And she and I have been working together for a decade. Made all of our shorts together. So yeah, I think Molly really helped us find Ruth's history.
I see that somebody's standing in some location. That means I have to stop very soon. You also shot in Pasadena. And this was in Pasadena, the facility, and then Altadena also?
Yeah. So I mean, the fires were very, very, very close to this care community, and luckily they were okay. But yeah, that's where we shot.
I also noticed that the care labor, there's a kind of racial component to that. I don't know if there's more to say to that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is an incredibly privileged care setting that Ruth is living in, that very few Americans can access. And I think when you walk into these sort of upscale care facilities, the racialized and classed nature of care and how it is both provided and received is hyper visible. You can see in the film that most of the residents are white people, and most of the caregivers are people of color. And I think it speaks to the sort of deeply inequitable care system we have in America that's becoming more so. Trump's recent budget is decimating Medicaid. 17 million older adults and people with disabilities rely upon Medicaid for their care, including people with memory loss in nursing homes. And so this is just to say that we're living through a moment where care is becoming even less accessible.
Be careful, you may be sent to Uganda.
I've said enough things on the record that it's too late, Bhaskar. I'm not. So.
Are you excited about Mamdani?
I'm very excited about Mamdani. We're gonna have Mira Nair as first mom, and we've got a filmmaker in office. But yes, I'm a Brooklynite. So.
Do you think she had something to do with those incredible spots, like where she runs in, dips in the cold water, and runs out?
There was an interview with her or with him commenting on it, and I think she was saying that she wasn't involved in the filmmaking.
You should get involved for the next round of spots. Thank you so much. This is just incredible, and I think we should really open it up. They must have questions for you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this film, and it was very moving on many different levels, and as you're talking, it's getting even more moving as I'm thinking back on it. There was something that hit me in the film that I think it must have been intentional, but you haven't talked about it yet. The similarity between many scenes of the film and the horror movie genre. You know, I think of the hallway and the hallway in The Shining. I think of some of the scenes with knives, some of the scenes where the sexual tension was getting to a point where I thought, is this going to end really badly? And I just wondered if that was conscious for you and what you were getting at by building that kind of tension.
You know, it's interesting. I wasn't thinking explicitly about the horror genre while I was making it, but was thinking about Ruth's relationship to this new space and to her vulnerabilities and fears as she's physically interacting with this new space. And in a way, that's a lot of what the horror genre is what is around the next corner, what is under the bed. And so I think there's, you know, as you're asking the question, I'm realizing there are these similarities just in terms of how she interacts with the space. But I was thinking more about, genre-wise, the coming of age genre, as I mentioned, but also the sort of genre of maternal melodrama and thinking about the relationship with the son in terms of that. But I think, I'd be fascinated to hear a horror genre read of the film, but I think I'll leave that to the scholars as well.
But I was asking you before about, I thought of Safe, Todd Haynes' film at some points, and that too has that element, like the everyday spaces become scary suddenly, right?
I guess you could say I like anxious melodramas, so maybe that's.
Thank you so much. I really loved everything you had to say about the ambient sound and the use of surrealism. But what I was really wondering is the ending. I was not expecting it to end right there. Were you always planning on ending it there, or was that something you decided in post? Would love to hear about how you decided on that.
You asked that so nicely. I've had Q&As where people are like, why did you end? It needed to be the dance. It's certainly a choice I had to fight for. It was one of the earliest things I wrote in the script, that the film would be bookended by Ruth dressing herself in the beginning and needing assistance with the task in the end. Because as much as I didn't want it to be a drama of decline, I did want her shifting care needs to be clear. And I felt that, we called the dance scene our prom scene, just thinking about the coming of age genre. And we set it up as a prom because we had a lot of residents, acting in that scene. It seemed to me that the sort of romance of the nuclear family that we get in the prom scene it's beautiful, but it's not truthful to the sort of daily intimacy that Ruth is experiencing, that the reality is that her son, as much as he loves her, is probably only going to be able to visit her or only visits her once a week maybe at most, and that the most consistent kind of physical intimacy that she's experiencing is with care workers. And so I wanted to come back to that effective exchange through labor because I think it's truer to her daily life. And so the prom was sort of my false ending. So yeah, it was an early choice, but a controversial one in our test screenings.
But I mean, in a way, signal your ambivalent relationship to it by, I don't know if that's the case, but that's how I read the dance, the guy, the way he moved suddenly. It's very comical also.
Yeah, well, he's H. John Benjamin is a comedian and voice actor.
Okay.
And that was part of why I cast him. We had a conversation where he said that as a comic, he was used to courting discomfort, and therefore the discomfort of the Oedipal stuff was easeful for him. And it was true. He really knew how to kind of, I felt, hold that line between experiencing it as the son and also honoring her desire.
Okay, so that's the distance. Yeah.
Great job. As a production sound mixer, I'd like to thank you for your sensitivity to the issues as you explained in the wax paper. It's unusual and rare in many directors, especially a young director, to be so conscious and conscientious of those kind of issues. It's not really a question, it's a comment though, because Bhaskar really hit, your soundtrack is lovely and very deliberate and well thought out. And you said you turned it up, but so many movies these days have a tendency to really turn it up. And you played it, you found the nice line between her subjective reality through sound, through your soundscape, but not hitting it too hard. Did you intend to go further and then you tried it and pulled back? Or, because it's nice. In the swimming pool scene, Coney Island comes in, that's probably about the strongest example where you're really taking us somewhere else. But on the whole, you keep it really, really, really in a nice space.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I guess turn it up was maybe the wrong expression because it wasn't so much volume, but rather the idea that the quietest spaces are the loudest ones, and that therefore, in some ways, it was letting our awareness of the sounds that existed in that space become manifest. Because as you know, so many films, the sound mix is done in a way to kind of eliminate a lot of the textures in the room. And so for us, it was a question of both with our sound recordist on set trying to pick up the details that we noticed in the space. We did a lot of wild track recordings on set, but then bringing in as much kind of detail we could, because I think we were also thinking about it almost as like the first night at camp feeling. Eli, my sound designer, and I were thinking about it that way, that when you're in this new environment, you hear the creak of the floor, you hear the clock, you hear all of these things, and that goes back to the horror question of the kind of anxiety around space. So yeah, it wasn't so much volume, but presence.
There's a question here.
I'm wondering if part of it is like a love letter to the caregivers. It seems like just the compassion and the skill, but also at some point someone has to leave, right? Like you left after 3 years of doing it and stuff like that. Is that part of your intention with this film? It's so beautiful.
Very much so. Thank you for that question. I think, first of all, films about aging, care workers are rarely in the narrative. They're often kind of almost relegated to the furniture of the film. So I wanted, first off, and if they are present, again, this goes back to the horror, it's usually a narrative of abuse. It's sort of the Nurse Ratched kind of archetype. And I don't want to deny, of course, there is elder abuse. That's a real problem. But I think the majority of care workers are incredibly dedicated and skilled and have integrity around their work, and that's not reflected in American cinema. So I wanted, in many ways, the sort of, Ruth's relationship with herself, I think, is the dominant relationship, but after that, to be her relationship with the care workers and the emotional exchange there, that even though it's a relationship based on labor, that the feelings between them are very real. And I wanted, care work is so deeply undervalued and undercompensated, and I think it's the most valuable work there is, because it's the work that makes life possible. And so I wanted the film to reflect that and to show the intimacy of that relationship and show the kind of nuance of that work. And in some ways, a big conflict for me was how much the film should show care settings as they are versus how they could be, and I think it kind of is in between. And so the film almost gives more time to the relationship than I think most care settings would allow, just in terms of the ratio of care workers to residents, but wanted to create the space to show the kind of nuance of care workers' emotional labor and physical labor. And so that's a long way of saying yes to your question. Yeah.
Thank you for the beautiful film. My question is about in the very beginning, in the kitchen scene, I think she put a piece of bread, toast, on the rack, right? The dish rack. So I wonder if that's your signal to, for me, it's like the signal to me as an audience that there's this bad memory lane coming up. And then, so that's one question. And then the follow-up is, it seems to the entire film, she seems to remember a lot of things, how to cook and recipes and so on, but she did not remember her son, who was supposed to be one of her most important, right, feature or person in her life. Just wonder how you actually balance that. Thank you.
Was there another question somewhere there? Maybe you could ask together. And
it's a tiny bit tangential, but you had mentioned that, including the residents, that they had made short films. One, I just think that seems like that would have been an amazing documentary of what an incredible gift to all of them. But what were their films about?
So I'll start there and then work backwards. They were all over the place. It was everything from, we had a kind of chamber drama of marital conflict. Someone made a sort of boozy earthquake music video. They really ranged all over the place, which was amazing. We wanted to document the process, but A, we didn't have the money, and B, it felt that if people were aware that they were being watched while learning, that they'd be less likely to experiment. So we felt that it should all be off camera. In terms of the toast, that came from a moment with a client of mine. She put her toast she didn't have a plate out, she was making a sandwich, and the toast was ready, but the other components of the sandwich weren't, and she put it in the dish rack. And at first I thought, oh, this is a symptom of her dementia. And then I thought, no, this is brilliant, it fits perfectly. And so I wanted that moment to kind of toe the line between, it's up to the viewer whether that's a signifier of dementia for you or of her creativity. In terms of the inconsistent, I think it's every person with dementia is different, and it's one of the components of memory loss that it can. It's not always what you think remains that remains, and oftentimes embodied things remain, and early memories. So it was, certainly a liberty I took in terms of deciding what stays and what doesn't. But I think her knife skills are such a early core muscle memory that I think they stay with Ruth till the end. Yeah.
So in Peter Brooks's adaptation of the Indian epic Mahabharata, one character is asking another questions, and one of the questions was, what is madness? And he thinks for a second and answers, a forgotten way. And maybe sometimes old age seems like a forgotten way. It's not forgotten, but it's turned into something like that, to be disregarded and swept away. And thank you for giving us this film, because I'm sure you've heard this already, but it does affect a lot of us who have gone through care and maybe also facing old age and questions of what's going to happen to us. How does one get into the line for this nice Pasadena place?
Well, there's a long wait list, and so there was a joke amongst our millennial crew that we would all put our names on the wait list now, and that by the time we got off it, we would have aged into the...
So we have lost it already, the chance.
I don't know. I can make some calls for you, Bhaskar.
You got it, what I was getting after. No, really, I was a little worried because I didn't want to do this moderating for a second, because I thought, then I heard you talk at the SBIFF, because I thought it'd be too cathartic for me. I've gone through some, lost stuff, and a lot of our colleagues, friends have. And it's not quite addressed in the same way. It's more about putting on dark glasses and trying not to cry, right? We don't mourn very well in this culture.
No, we don't.
Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you.